The howling wind carried Sarah Jenkins' desperate prayers into the vast expanse of the Arizona Territory, as she knelt beside her youngest child's bed in the autumn of 1878. 5-year-old Emma's fever had raged for 3 days, and Sarah had exhausted every remedy in her limited arsenal of frontier medicine. "Please, Lord," Sarah whispered, her slender fingers clasped until her knuckles whitened, "send us help. I cannot lose another." She glanced around the small bedroom at her other 4 children, all asleep on makeshift pallets surrounding their sister's bed, unwilling to leave her side even in slumber. The knock that came just before midnight startled Sarah so badly she nearly overturned the basin of cooling water beside Emma's bed. No one traveled to the Jenkins homestead, 3 miles outside of Coolidge, Arizona, after dark, not unless something was terribly wrong. Sarah tucked the threadbare quilt around Emma's thin shoulders, brushed past her other sleeping children, and hurried through the main room of the modest cabin. She grabbed her late husband's shotgun from above the mantel before approaching the door. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Name's Vincent Irwin, madam," came the reply, deep and unfamiliar. "My horse threw a shoe about a mile back, saw your light, hoping you might spare some water and point me toward town." Sarah hesitated, shotgun ready. Since losing Thomas to a mining accident 14 months ago, she'd learned to be cautious. 5 children depended on her survival. "I've got a sick child, Mr. Irwin. I can offer water from the pump out back, but I can't invite you in." A pause followed. "I understand your caution, madam. But I heard you just now, praying." His voice softened. "I was a medic during the war. Maybe I can help your little one." Sarah's breath caught. She hadn't considered that anyone might hear her desperate pleas. She cracked open the door, shotgun still raised, and peered into the darkness. The man standing on her porch wore trail, dusted clothes, a weathered Stetson pushed back on his head revealing dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. His face, illuminated by the lantern she'd left burning in the window, showed lines of weariness but kind eyes. No guns visible, though she noticed a leather medical bag at his feet. "You're a doctor?" Sarah asked, hope and suspicion warring in her heart. "Not officially, madam. Field medic with the Union Army, then picked up more from a Cherokee healer I traveled with for a spell. I've nursed many through fevers." Sarah glanced back toward the bedroom where her children slept, where little Emma struggled for each breath. She'd buried Thomas. She couldn't bear to bury a child, too. "My daughter's been burning up for days. Nothing I do brings the fever down." She lowered the shotgun slightly. "If you can help her." Vincent Irwin nodded solemnly. "I'll do everything I can, Mrs. Jenkins, Sarah Jenkins." She stepped back, allowing him entry. As he crossed the threshold, Sarah noticed his slight limp, the way he favored his left leg. He removed his hat, revealing more of that dark hair with distinguished threads of silver. "The children are this way," she said, leading him to the bedroom. Emma lay still as death, her normally rosy cheeks flushed crimson, golden curls plastered to her forehead with sweat. Her siblings, 10-year-old James, 8-year-old twins Mary and Martha, and 7-year-old Daniel remained asleep on their makeshift beds around her. Vincent set his medical bag on the nightstand and immediately placed a gentle hand on Emma's forehead. His weathered face grew serious as he checked her pulse. "How long has she been like this?" he asked, voice low to avoid waking the others. "The fever started 3 days ago. It's gotten worse each night." Sarah wrung her hands. "I've tried willow bark tea, cool compresses, everything my mother taught me." Vincent nodded as he opened his bag. "You've done well to keep her alive this long. This fever's dangerous." He extracted several small bottles and packets. "I need clean water, boiled if possible, and fresh cloths." Sarah hurried to the kitchen, her mind racing. She'd prayed for help, and a man with medical knowledge appeared at her door. Coincidence? Or the miracle she'd begged for? When she returned with the requested items, Vincent had already unbuttoned Emma's nightgown to check her chest and was frowning at her rash spreading across her torso. "Scarlet fever," he murmured. "I've seen it before." Sarah's knees weakened. "Is she going to die?" Vincent's eyes met hers, steady and determined. "Not if I can help it, but the next few hours will be critical." He worked methodically, mixing powders from his bag into water, coaxing the unconscious child to swallow small sips. He bathed her overheated body with cool water infused with herbs that filled the room with a clean, medicinal scent. All the while, he explained each step to Sarah in a low, calm voice that gradually eased her panic. By dawn, Emma's fever had broken. The little girl opened her eyes for the first time in days. Weak but alert enough to take a few spoonfuls of broth Sarah had prepared. The other children woke to find the stranger in their home, initially wary until Sarah explained he had helped their sister. James, the eldest, watched Vincent with his father's serious eyes, protective and uncertain. "Are you staying?" Mary asked Vincent directly, her 8-year-old curiosity overcoming any shyness. Vincent glanced at Sarah, who was spooning broth into Emma's mouth. "That depends on your mother, little miss. My horse still needs shoeing, and your sister needs watching for a day or two to make sure the fever stays gone." Sarah met his gaze across the room. Exhaustion lined both their faces after the long night's vigil. "We can't pay you much," she said quietly. "But we have a lean-to out back where you can rest and food to share while you're here." Vincent nodded. "That's more than fair." He turned to James. "Perhaps your young man here can show me where I might wash up." Over the next 3 days, Emma steadily improved. Vincent checked on her regularly, but spent most of his time making himself useful around the struggling homestead. He repaired the sagging front porch steps, fixed the leaking roof over the kitchen, and reinforced the chicken coop that had been damaged in a recent storm. Sarah watched him with her children patient as he answered Daniel's endless questions about his travels, gentle as he showed the twins how to identify healing plants in the scrubby land around their home, respectful of James's tentative offers to help with man's work. On the evening of the 3rd day, Sarah found Vincent sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the sunset painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. She handed him a cup of coffee and sat beside him, maintaining a proper distance. "Emma asked if you were an angel," she said, smiling slightly. "I didn't know what to tell her." Vincent chuckled, the sound warm in the cooling evening air. "I've been called many things in my 42 years, Mrs. Jenkins, but never an angel." "Sarah, please," she said, surprising herself with the invitation to familiarity. "And what should I call you, Vincent or Vince?" Vincent to strangers, Vince to friends. He sipped his coffee. "I hope I've earned the latter." Sarah studied him. In the dying light, she could better see the scar that ran along his jawline, partially hidden by several days of beard growth. His hands, wrapped around the coffee mug, were strong but gentle hands that had saved her daughter's life. "You have," she said softly, "more than earned it." Vincent nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Your place needs work, Sarah. That west fence won't make it through winter and your well pump's about to give out." Sarah sighed. "I know. Thomas, my husband, he had plans to fix everything, then the mining accident." She trailed off, the familiar ache of loss tightening her chest. "I'm sorry," Vincent said simply. "Losing someone like that leaves scars that don't show." Sarah heard the understanding in his voice. "You've lost someone too." It wasn't a question, but Vincent answered anyway. "My wife and son. Typhoid, 6 years ago in Kansas." He set his empty cup down. "That's when I started drifting. Couldn't bear to stay in the house we'd built together. They sat in companionable silence as darkness settled over the land. The confession hung between them, not a burden but a bridge. "Where were you heading?" Sarah finally asked. "Before your horse lost its shoe." Vincent considered the question. "Nowhere particular. Heard there was work in the silver mines near Tombstone. Though after seeing what mining did to your family, I'm rethinking that plan." Sarah studied his profile. "What did you do before the war?" "Carpentry, mostly. My father taught me. Built houses, furniture." He flexed his hands. "Still can when there's call for it." Sarah took a deep breath. "Coolidge needs a carpenter. The town's growing, new families arriving monthly." She hesitated. "If you were looking to stop drifting for a while." Their eyes met in the darkness. Sarah felt a flutter in her chest she hadn't experienced since Thomas first courted her over a decade ago. Vincent broke the moment first, standing with a slight groan as his stiff legs straightened. "Something to consider," he said, neither accepting nor rejecting her subtle invitation to stay. "We should both get some rest. I promised Daniel I'd show him how to mend fishing nets tomorrow." Sarah nodded, gathering their empty cups. "Good night, Vince." His smile was just visible in the moonlight. "Good night, Sarah." The following day brought unexpected visitors. Sarah was hanging laundry while Vincent helped James and Daniel haul water from the well when the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 3 riders approached Harlan Monroe, the banker who held the mortgage on their homestead, flanked by his son Percy and Bill Taylor, the local deputy sheriff. Sarah's stomach knotted. Monroe had been pressuring her to sell the land since Thomas died, offering less than half its worth. Each month, making the mortgage payment became more difficult. Vincent moved to stand beside her as the men dismounted. His presence, solid and reassuring, gave her courage. "Mrs. Jenkins," Monroe called, his voice falsely jovial. "Didn't expect to find company out here." His eyes narrowed at Vincent. "Mr. Monroe," Sarah acknowledged coolly. "What brings you all this way?" Monroe straightened his vest over his substantial belly. "Just checking on my investment. Your payment's due in 3 days, as I'm sure you recall." "I haven't forgotten." Sarah kept her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. The doctor's visit for Emma had depleted her savings. The payment would be short. "And who might this be?" Monroe gestured toward Vincent. Before Sarah could respond, Vincent stepped forward. "Vincent Irwin." "Just passing through, helping with some repairs." Deputy Taylor eyed Vincent suspiciously. "Don't recall seeing you in Coolidge before." "Haven't made it into town yet," Vincent replied easily. "Mrs. Jenkins' daughter took ill. I have some medical training." Monroe's son Percy, a thin man with hungry eyes, smirked. "Mighty convenient, a stranger showing up to help a widow woman living alone." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but Vincent remained composed. "The children and I are grateful for Mr. Irwin's assistance," she said firmly. "Now, if there's nothing else, we have work to do." Monroe cleared his throat. "Actually, I came with a proposition. I'm prepared to take this property off your hands, save you the struggle of trying to meet payments you clearly can't afford." "The land's not for sale," Sarah replied immediately. "Be sensible, woman. What can you possibly do with this place? You can barely keep it running." Monroe gestured dismissively at the modest homestead. "I'm offering enough for you to move into town, perhaps open a small shop, Mrs. Jenkins said the land's not for sale," Vincent interrupted, his voice quiet but hard as steel. "I believe that concludes your business here." Monroe's face darkened. "This doesn't concern you, stranger." "The welfare of this family concerns me," Vincent replied evenly. "And your offer is robbery, not charity." Monroe sputtered indignantly while Deputy Taylor stepped forward, hand resting on his gun belt. "You'd best watch your tone." James moved to stand beside his mother and Vincent, his young face determined despite his obvious fear. Daniel followed his brother's example, the two boys creating a united front with the adults. "We're not looking for trouble," Vincent said to Taylor, "just asking for respect for Mrs. Jenkins' decision about her own property." Monroe adjusted his hat, clearly frustrated but unwilling to create a scene. "3 days, Mrs. Jenkins. I expect payment in full or we'll discuss foreclosure." As the men rode away, Sarah released the breath she'd been holding. That was Harlan Monroe. "He's been trying to get our land since Thomas died, says he wants to expand his cattle operation." Vincent nodded thoughtfully. "Men like that think persistence wears people down." "He's not wrong," Sarah admitted. "Each month gets harder." She looked at Vincent directly. "I don't have enough for this month's payment. Not after buying medicine for Emma." Vincent's expression remained neutral. "How much are you short?" $8, Sarah replied, the sum substantial to her limited finances. Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. "Consider it repayment for your hospitality," he said, offering her several coins. Sarah stared at the money, pride warring with necessity. "I can't, you can," Vincent interrupted gently. "And you will for their sake." He nodded toward James and Daniel, who were pretending not to listen while they returned to their chores. "I'll pay you back," Sarah insisted. Vincent's smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I don't doubt it." That evening, after the children were asleep, Sarah found Vincent in the lean-to, packing his few belongings. "You're leaving?" she asked, unable to keep the disappointment from her voice. Vincent straightened, wincing slightly as his bad leg protested. "Thought it best after today. Monroe and his men will be watching." "Your reputation, my reputation," Sarah interrupted, "is my concern." She stepped closer. "The children will be devastated if you disappear overnight." Vincent sighed. "Sarah, I'm a drifter, have been for years. I'm not sure I remember how to stay in one place." "Then remember," she said simply. "Coolidge needs a carpenter, my children need." She hesitated. "They need someone who can teach them things I can't." "And what do you need, Sarah Jenkins?" Vincent asked, his voice low. The question hung between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Sarah found herself unable to articulate the growing feelings that Vincent's presence had awakened. "I need to know my children will be all right," she finally answered. "That this home Thomas and I built together won't be lost." Vincent studied her face in the lantern light. "I can't promise to stay forever, but I can help get this place in shape before winter. Maybe look into carpentry work in town." Relief washed over Sarah. "That's all I'm asking. For now." The next morning, Vincent rode into Coolidge with Sarah and James to make the mortgage payment. The small frontier town bustled with activity freight wagons unloading supplies at the general store. Cowboys gathered outside the saloon, women shopping and gossiping in the dusty street. As they tied their horses outside the bank, Vincent spotted a "Help Wanted" sign in the window of Simmons Furniture and Undertaking, a common combination in frontier towns. "Go ahead with your business," he told Sarah. "I'll meet you at the general store after I inquire about that position." Sarah nodded, gripping James' shoulder as they entered the bank to face Monroe. Vincent pushed open the door to the furniture shop, where a heavy-set man with impressive mustaches was measuring a pine board. "Help you?" the man asked without looking up. "Saw your sign," Vincent replied. "I'm a carpenter by trade." This caught the man's attention. He straightened, assessing Vincent with shrewd eyes. "Gerald Simmons," he introduced himself. "You got experience with fine work, not just framing. Built everything from cradles to coffins," Vincent answered honestly. "My father trained me in Connecticut before I headed west." Simmons' eyebrows rose. "Eastern training, you say? Let's see your hands." Vincent extended his hands, calloused but steady. Simmons examined them, then nodded approvingly. Got more orders than I can handle with the town growing, Simmons admitted. Need someone who can work unsupervised. Pays fair $3 a day for quality work. When can I start? Vincent asked. Right now, if you're of a mind to. Got a dining set needs finishing by week's end. Vincent glanced toward the bank where Sarah was still conducting her business. I can start tomorrow. Need to help Mrs. Jenkins get back to her homestead today. Simmons' expression changed. Sarah Jenkins, Thomas' widow. Yes, her daughter took ill. I've been helping around their place. Simmons studied Vincent with renewed interest. Thomas was a good man. That family's had a rough go of it. He stroked his mustache thoughtfully. Were you staying in town? Haven't sorted that yet, Vincent admitted. Room above the shop comes with the job if you want it. Nothing fancy, but it's clean. Vincent considered the offer. A room in town would be more proper than staying at Sarah's homestead, yet close enough to continue helping her family. I'll take it, he decided. See you at sunup tomorrow. By the time he joined Sarah and James at the general store, Sarah's face showed the relief of having made the mortgage payment, but also the strain of stretching her limited funds for supplies. How did it go at the bank? Vincent asked quietly as James examined a display of fishing hooks. Monroe wasn't pleased to receive payment in full, Sarah replied with a small smile. Made it clear he still thinks I'm fighting a losing battle. And the furniture shop, I start tomorrow, Vincent confirmed, comes with lodging in town. Something flickered across Sarah's face, disappointment perhaps, but she quickly masked it. That's wonderful news. The children will be glad you're staying nearby. Just nearby? Vincent asked, his voice teasing. A blush colored Sarah's cheeks. We all will be glad, she amended. You've become important to us. Their conversation was interrupted by James returning with the fishing hooks he'd selected, carefully counting out pennies from his own small savings. That night, after explaining to the children that Vincent would be working and staying in town but visiting regularly, Sarah walked with him to the lean-to to help gather his belongings. The twins cried, she said softly. They've grown attached to you so quickly. I'll visit often, Vincent promised, folding his spare shirt. And now I can properly court their mother if she's amenable. Sarah's hands stilled on the blanket she was folding. Court me, Vincent turned to face her. That's generally what happens when a man finds himself thinking about a woman at all hours, when he wakes up looking forward to seeing her face and goes to sleep remembering her smile. Sarah's heart raced. Vince, you don't need to answer now, he assured her. We have time. I just wanted my intentions to be clear. Sarah nodded, suddenly shy. I haven't been courted in a very long time. Then we'll remember together, Vincent said gently, how it's done properly. The following weeks established a new rhythm for the Jenkins family. Vincent rode out from town every Sunday after church to spend the day helping with larger projects around the homestead, reinforcing the roof, rebuilding the west fence, repairing the well pump. Often he arrived bearing small gifts, hair ribbons for the girls, fishing line for the boys, a new cooking pot for Sarah. In town, he quickly earned a reputation as a skilled craftsman. His furniture pieces became sought after, commanding higher prices that Simmons happily shared. Vincent saved carefully. Mindful of the future, he was beginning to envision a future with Sarah and her children. As autumn deepened toward winter, Vincent found himself spending more evenings at the Jenkins homestead, often staying for supper before riding back to town. He taught James and Daniel to carve simple wooden toys, showed the twins how to identify constellations in the night sky, and read stories to a fully recovered Emma. For Sarah, watching this man with her children stirred emotions both wonderful and frightening. Thomas had been her first and only love. She'd married him at 17, born their first child at 19. Now, at 31, she found herself experiencing the fluttering nervousness of new attraction, the quiet joy of deepening affection. Vincent courted her with respectful care, never pushing beyond the boundaries of propriety. A gentle touch to her hand while passing the salt at dinner, walking close beside her while the children ran ahead during a Sunday stroll. Once, a kiss pressed to her knuckles when she thanked him for fixing the stove that had smoked incessantly since Thomas died. October brought a surprise visitor to the homestead. Sarah was teaching the girls to make preserves from the last of the season's fruit when hoofbeats approached. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch, surprised to see Gerald Simmons riding up. "Mrs. Jenkins," he called, tipping his hat as he dismounted. "Hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all, Mr. Simmons," she replied, curious about his unexpected appearance. "What brings you out this way?" Simmons glanced toward the house where the twins peered curiously through the window. "Came to speak with you about Vincent, if I may." Sarah's heart jumped. "Is something wrong? Has he been hurt?" "No, no," Simmons quickly reassured her. "He's fine, more than fine. Man works like two men and has the skill of three." He cleared his throat. "That's partly why I'm here. Got an offer from a furniture dealer in Tucson. Wants me to expand my business, become a supplier for the whole territory." Sarah waited, uncertain how this concerned her. "Thing is," Simmons continued, "I'm getting on in years, don't have a son to take over, been thinking of taking on a partner." He met her eyes directly. "Vincent's the best craftsman I've seen in 20 years out here," understanding dawned. "You want to make Vincent your partner?" Simmons nodded. "Half the business, with option to buy me out completely in 5 years when I'm ready to retire." He twisted his hat in his hands. "It's a solid opportunity. Man could support a family well on those terms." Sarah's mind raced. A partnership would mean Vincent was putting down permanent roots in Coolidge. It would mean stability, respectability, everything a drifter typically avoided. "Why are you telling me this before Vincent?" she asked carefully. Simmons smiled knowingly. "Because I've seen how he looks at you, Mrs. Jenkins, and I've seen him ride out here every chance he gets. Man doesn't make decisions like this without considering his heart." He replaced his hat. "Thought you should know what's coming before he does." After Simmons departed, Sarah moved through the rest of the day in a daze of conflicting emotions. Hope and fear battled within her. If Vincent accepted the partnership, he would have reason to stay permanently. But permanent ties meant permanent vulnerability to loss, to grief, to all the hardships she'd already endured once. When Vincent arrived the following Sunday, Sarah watched him closely as he played with the children, looking for any sign he'd already spoken with Simmons. He seemed the same as always, attentive to the children, respectful toward her, quick to smile but carrying that underlying seriousness that spoke of his own past sorrows. After dinner, while the children washed dishes, Vincent suggested a walk. The November air carried a bite of the coming winter as they strolled toward the creek that marked the eastern boundary of the Jenkins property. "Something's on your mind," Vincent observed after they'd walked in silence for several minutes. "You've been watching me all day." Sarah smiled ruefully. "Am I that transparent?" "Only to someone who studies your face every chance he gets," Vincent replied, his tone light but his eyes serious. Sarah gathered her courage. "Mr. Simmons came to see me yesterday." Vincent's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Did he? What about?" "He wants to make you his partner." Sarah watched Vincent's reaction carefully. "He said it would be enough to support a family." Vincent was silent for several steps, processing this revelation. "He spoke to you before me," he finally said, understanding in his voice. Sarah nodded. "He thought I should know." Vincent stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "And what do you think, Sarah, about a drifter putting down roots?" "I think," she said carefully, "that it depends on why he's putting down roots. If it's just for business, it's not just for business," Vincent interrupted gently. "You know that." Sarah's breath caught. "Then why?" Vincent took her gloved hands in his. "Because I never expected to find a reason to stop drifting. Never thought I'd find someone who made me want to build something permanent again." He squeezed her fingers. "Until I heard a woman praying for a miracle and somehow found one myself in the process." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Loving someone means risking loss. I've already lost so much." Vincent nodded soberly. "I know that fear intimately. Woke up with it every day for 6 years." He released one of her hands to gently wipe a tear from her cheek. "But I'd rather risk the pain than miss the joy of loving you, Sarah Jenkins." Sarah leaned into his touch, her heart full. "My children already love you, and I love them," Vincent assured her, "but it's their mother I'm asking to marry me." Sarah's eyes widened. "Marry you?" Vincent smiled. "That was my plan before Simmons ever mentioned a partnership. The business just makes the timing right." He grew serious again. "I know I'm not Thomas. I won't try to replace him in your heart or your children's memories. But I promise to cherish you all, to protect you, to build a good life together." Sarah reached up to touch his face, tracing the scar along his jaw. "Thomas would want us to be happy," she said softly. "The children to have a father, me to have a husband." She took a deep breath. "Yes, Vincent Irwin, I will marry you." The joy that transformed his weathered face made him look years younger. He drew her into his arms, his kiss gentle but filled with promise. When they returned to the house, the children sensed something had changed. They gathered in the main room, watching with curious eyes as Vincent and Sarah stood before them, hands joined. "Children," Sarah began, her voice wavering slightly with emotion, "Mr. Irwin has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes." A moment of stunned silence followed, broken when Emma launched herself across the room to wrap her arms around Vincent's legs. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" she asked, looking up at him with Thomas's blue eyes. Vincent lifted the little girl into his arms. "It does, little one." James, always the most reserved, stepped forward. "Will you be our father now?" Vincent regarded the boy seriously. "I would be honored to be your father, James, but I know you had a good father already. I won't ask you to forget him." James nodded, processing this answer. "Would it be all right if I called you Pa? Not right away, but when I'm ready." Vincent swallowed the lump in his throat. "That would be more than all right." The twins erupted into excited chatter, while Daniel solemnly extended his hand to shake Vincent's, mimicking the adult gesture he'd seen men use to seal important agreements. They were married 2 weeks later in Coolidge's small church. The entire town turned out, partly from genuine goodwill, and partly from curiosity about the drifter who'd won the heart of Thomas Jenkins' widow. Gerald Simmons stood as Vincent's best man, beaming with satisfaction at the partnership papers he'd drawn up as a wedding gift. Sarah wore her best dress, freshly altered by the wives of Coolidge, who had rallied around the family once news of the engagement spread. The children stood beside them during the ceremony, James proud in his father's mended suit coat, the twins in matching dresses with new ribbons, Daniel struggling to stand still in his Sunday best, and Emma clutching a small bouquet of winter greenery. As they exchanged vows, Sarah felt Thomas's memory as a gentle presence, not an obstacle. The love she had shared with him had shaped her, given her 5 beautiful children, taught her the courage to open her heart again. Vincent's hands were steady as he placed the simple gold band on her finger, his eyes never leaving hers as he promised to love and cherish her until death parted them. That evening, after celebrating with a community supper at the church, they returned to the homestead as a family. Vincent carried a sleeping Emma from the wagon while Sarah guided the sleepy twins. James and Daniel, suddenly solemn with the weight of the day's significance, carried the wedding gifts inside. Later, after the children were settled in bed, Sarah and Vincent stood on the porch of what was now their home together. The winter stars spread across the Arizona sky, brilliantly clear in the cold air. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked, his arm around her waist. Sarah leaned against his solid strength. "More than I thought possible again," she answered truthfully. "When I prayed that night, I asked for help for Emma. I never imagined God would send me so much more." Vincent smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I was just looking for a place to water my horse," he reminded her. "Found a family instead." "You miss drifting?" Sarah asked, a last hint of insecurity in her voice. Vincent turned her to face him, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Not for a single moment. Everything I want is right here." As winter settled over Coolidge, Vincent moved his few belongings from the room above the furniture shop to the Jenkins, now Irwin homestead. The lean-to where he'd first stayed was quickly converted into a workshop, where he crafted special pieces for Simmons' expanding business and taught James and Daniel the basics of woodworking. Sarah watched her family transform under Vincent's steady influence. James grew more confident, thriving under the gentle guidance of a man who respected the boy's memories of his father while helping him learn new skills. The twins found in Vincent a willing audience for their stories and songs. Daniel, always quieter than his siblings, blossomed with Vincent's patient attention to his mechanical curiosity. And Emma, who had nearly died before Vincent arrived, followed her new father like a shadow, often found curled in his lap as he sketched designs for furniture. The business partnership with Simmons flourished. By spring, orders for Simmons and Irwin furniture came from as far as Phoenix and Tucson. The additional income allowed Vincent to hire 2 young men from town to help with the heavier work around the homestead, giving him more time with his new family. When Sarah discovered she was expecting a child in late April, the news was met with joyful celebration. Vincent's hands trembled as he placed them on her still flat stomach, his eyes filled with a mixture of elation and old pain. "I never thought I'd be a father again," he whispered. "After losing my boy." Sarah covered his hands with her own. "This child will never replace the son you lost," she assured him. "Just as you haven't replaced Thomas, our hearts simply expand to make room for more love." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall. The children watched with fascination as their mother's belly grew, especially Emma, who could scarcely remember when her younger brother Daniel was born on a cold December night, almost exactly a year after Vincent had first knocked on their door. Sarah went into labor. The midwife was summoned from town, and Vincent paced anxiously outside the bedroom door while the children huddled together in the main room, alternately praying and asking questions about their new sibling. Shortly after midnight, a lusty cry announced the arrival of Samuel Thomas Irwin, named for both Vincent's father and Sarah's first husband, a bridge between their past and future. When Vincent was finally allowed to enter the bedroom, the sight of Sarah holding their son overwhelmed him. He sank to his knees beside the bed, one hand gently touching the dark hair that already covered the infant's head. "He's perfect," Vincent whispered, voice thick with emotion. Sarah smiled tiredly, her face glowing despite the exhaustion of labor. "Would you like to hold your son?" Vincent gathered the tiny bundle with reverent care, marveling at the miniature features and perfect fingers. "Hello, Samuel," he murmured. "You have quite a family waiting to meet you." The door creaked open as 5 curious faces peered in. At Sarah's nod, the children entered quietly, gathering around Vincent to glimpse their new brother. "He's so small," Mary whispered. "Was I that tiny?" Daniel wondered. "He has father's chin," James observed, using the name he'd recently begun calling Vincent. "And your mother's mouth," Vincent added, smiling at Sarah. As the family crowded together around the bed, Sarah looked at the faces of her children, the 5 she had borne with Thomas, and this new life she had created with Vincent. The prayer she had offered in desperation, that autumn night, had been answered beyond anything she could have imagined. Vincent met her eyes over the heads of their children, understanding passing between them without words. They had both known profound loss, had both wandered through the wilderness of grief. Yet somehow, their separate journeys had led them to this moment, to this family, this love, this second chance. Outside, the Arizona winter wind swept across the strengthened fence lines and improved roof of the homestead, finding no weakness in the home Vincent had helped rebuild. Inside, warmth and light pushed back the darkness as the Irwin family welcomed its newest member, secure in the knowledge that what had begun as a desperate prayer had transformed into a lifetime of answered ones. Years later, when asked how they met, Vincent and Sarah would share a private smile before telling the story of a desperate prayer, a thrown horseshoe, and the night a drifting cowboy found his way home to a woman who had stopped believing in miracles. Their family continued to grow. A daughter, Rose, joined them 2 years after Samuel's birth, completing their family of 9. The homestead expanded as the furniture business thrived. James eventually joined Vincent as an apprentice at Simmons and Irwin, showing remarkable talent for his father's craft. The twins became teachers at the Coolidge School, while Daniel's mechanical aptitude led him to study engineering in Phoenix. Emma, whose illness had brought Vincent into their lives, grew into a compassionate young woman who assisted the town doctor. Sarah and Vincent grew old together, watching their children establish their own families, their grandchildren playing in the same yard where a lone rider had once approached a widow's door on a fateful autumn night. And each year, on the anniversary of that night, they would stand together on the porch under the stars, offering thanks for the miracle that had brought them together, a miracle born of desperation, and answered with love that had healed them both.